Imagine a company so powerful that it had its own army. Not a security team, not private guards, a full army, with 260,000 soldiers, more soldiers than the British government itself had. Imagine a company that had its own navy, its own courts where it could put people on trial, its own prisons, its own currency. Imagine a company that governed more people than any government in Europe, that collected taxes from 200 million people, that made laws, fought wars, and controlled the destinies of entire nations. Does that sound like a government to you? It was not. It was a company, the British East India Company, founded in 1600 by a group of London merchants who just wanted to make money trading spices. What they created over the next 250 years was something the world had never seen before and has never quite seen since. A corporation that was also an empire. Their story tells us something profound about the relationship between money and power, about how economic systems can be used to control entire populations, about how a business, when given enough freedom and enough time, can become more powerful than any state. This is the story of the most powerful corporation in history. Welcome to Opie Vault. The year is 1600. Queen Elizabeth I of England signs a royal charter. This document gives a group of London merchants the exclusive right to trade with the East Indies. It was a vague term for the lands east of the Cape of Good Hope. These merchants are not soldiers or colonizers. They are businessmen. They want one thing: profit. At this time, the spice trade was the most profitable business in the world. Spices from Asia were worth more than gold. The problem was, the Portuguese and Dutch already controlled most of the trade routes. The English needed to compete, and the East India Company was their tool. The company raised money from investors, exactly like a modern stock company. Merchants bought shares. If a voyage succeeded, they shared the profits. If it failed, they shared the loss. Their early voyages were often disasters. Ships sank, crews died, cargoes were lost. But the few voyages that succeeded were so extraordinarily profitable that investors kept coming back. Slowly, the company established trading posts, called factories, along the coasts of India. Places like Surat, Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. These were not conquests, not yet. They were just business offices. But business offices have a way of turning into something else when the company behind them gets powerful enough. Here is how a trading company becomes an empire. You establish a trading post in a foreign country. To protect it, you hire local guards. When those guards are not enough, you hire more. Eventually, you have a small army. With that army, you can negotiate from a stronger position. You can push competitors out. You can make deals with local rulers that favor you. When a local ruler cannot repay a loan to you, you take territory as payment. Now you have land. To govern that land, you need administrators. To protect it, you need soldiers. Within a few generations, you have an army larger than most countries, territory larger than most countries, and power that most governments can only dream of. This is exactly what happened to the East India Company. The tipping point came in 1757, the Battle of Plassey. The company's army, led by Robert Clive, defeated the Nawab of Bengal in a battle that lasted barely a day. After Plassey, Bengal, one of the wealthiest regions in the entire world, fell under company control. And here is the economic horror at the heart of this story. Bengal was not just conquered, it was systematically drained. The company extracted enormous wealth from Bengal: taxes, trade monopolies, forced purchasing of local goods at below-market prices. In the decades following Plassey, famines devastated Bengal. Millions died. The company had turned a prosperous region into an economic extraction machine.
Let me give you the most important economic fact about the East India Company's rule. India, before British colonization, was one of the wealthiest regions on Earth. Historians estimate that in 1700, India's share of global GDP was around 25%, a quarter of everything the world produced. By 1900, after 150 years of company rule, followed by direct British government rule, India's share of global GDP had fallen to under 4%. Where did that wealth go? It went to Britain. Economist Utsa Patnaik estimated that Britain extracted approximately $45 trillion worth of value from India during the colonial period. In today's money, over 200 years, this was not just trade, this was systematic extraction. The company had a genius mechanism for doing this. They would collect tax revenue from Indian farmers and merchants. Then they would use that tax revenue to buy Indian goods, textiles, spices, cotton. Then they would export those goods to Britain and sell them at a massive profit. India's own money was being used to buy India's own products, which were then taken out of India forever. The Indian economy was hollowed out. Local industries were destroyed by cheaper British manufactured goods. Indian weavers, who had supplied the world's finest textiles for centuries, were put out of business. This is what made the East India Company so extraordinarily profitable and so extraordinarily destructive. The East India Company did not last forever. No corporation does. Two things brought it down. First, the Indian Rebellion of 1857, also called the Sepoy Mutiny. Indian soldiers employed by the company rose up against British rule. The rebellion spread across northern India and took over a year to suppress. After 1857, the British government decided the company could no longer be trusted to rule India. The Crown took direct control of India. The company was dissolved in 1874. But the second reason, less dramatic but equally important, was economics. The company had always been run for profit, but as it became more empire and less company, it became increasingly expensive to maintain. Armies, administrators, court systems, all of these cost money. By the mid-1800s, the company was actually losing money. It was borrowing heavily. The British government had to repeatedly bail it out. The shareholders who had originally invested for profit were no longer making money. The whole point of the company, to generate returns, had been forgotten in the business of governing a subcontinent. When profit disappears, so does the purpose of a corporation. The most powerful company in history simply ceased to exist, replaced by a government. But by then, the damage was done. India would spend the next century trying to rebuild what had been taken from it. So what do we take from the East India Company's story? In 1600, a group of merchants pooled their money to trade spices. By 1800, their company governed a subcontinent. This happened not because of military genius, not because of any single great leader. It happened because of economic systems. The company understood profit. It understood leverage. It understood how to use money to create power, and then use power to create more money. And it had something else. Time. It did not need to conquer India in a day. It took 150 years. Slowly. One trading post, one battle, one bankruptcy at a time. The lesson is uncomfortable, because we live in a world of very large, very powerful corporations, companies that operate across borders, companies with economies larger than many countries. The East India Company reminds us that unchecked corporate power without accountability, does not just affect stock prices. It affects real people, real communities, real nations. Understanding this history is not about blaming the past. It is about understanding how power actually works, so we can make better decisions about how to structure it in the future. If this video opened your eyes, hit that like button. Share it with someone who has never thought about corporate power this way. Subscribe to OP Vault. Next week, we keep going deeper. Next up, the Great Depression, how one stock market crash starved the world. See you there.